There are countless natural landscapes that seem almost unreal. That is because Earth is the product of billions of years of geological, climatic, and biological processes acting in remarkably different ways. What appears impossible to our eyes is, in reality, the result of natural phenomena unfolding over immense spans of time. Curiously, many of the planet's most breathtaking places were created by a combination of extraordinarily rare events. In today's video, we've selected some of the most incredible destinations on Earth. By the end of this journey, you'll discover landscapes that defy logic and seem almost impossible to exist. Thingvellir National Park. Thingvellir National Park always leaves me with a feeling that's difficult to describe. Thingvellir is located in Iceland, just over 25 miles from the capital city of Reykjavik. The distance may seem short, but the moment you leave the city behind, the scenery changes dramatically. The roads cross fields blanketed with moss, crystal-clear rivers, and volcanic rock formations that look as though they belong to another era. Little by little, every trace of civilization fades away, replaced by a silence that seems to dominate everything around you. The first breathtaking view usually comes when the valley finally appears. The towering rock walls resemble enormous scars carved into the surface of the earth. They were not created by ordinary erosion or by a single ancient earthquake. These formations exist because two tectonic plates have been slowly drifting apart for millions of years. On one side lies the North American plate, on the other, the Eurasian plate. Between them is a gap that widens by just a few millimeters every year. That may not sound like much. A few millimeters won't change anyone's life in a single year. But geology has never been in a hurry. Instead, it patiently gathers tiny movements over millions of years until they become landscapes capable of leaving anyone speechless. When we think of historic places, we usually imagine ruins built by people. But Thingvellir was built by the planet itself. Thingvellir also holds extraordinary historical significance. It was here that one of the world's oldest parliamentary institutions was established. In the year 930, leaders from different regions of Iceland began gathering in this valley to settle disputes, create laws, and make collective decisions. There was no grand stone building, no golden thrones, certainly no luxurious halls. Parliament met entirely in the open air. The vegetation here is equally remarkable. Moss blankets vast stretches of solidified lava, creating a striking contrast between vivid green and the black volcanic rock. During the summer, delicate wildflowers quietly bloom across the landscape, while autumn transforms parts of the valley into a sea of golden tones that completely change its appearance. Cheow Lan Lake. What appears before your eyes is far more than a lake surrounded by mountains. It is a forest that never truly disappeared. In southern Thailand, within Khao Sok National Park, lies a landscape that seems to have escaped from the imagination of a painter. Towering limestone mountains rise almost vertically, covered by vegetation so dense that, from above, it resembles an endless green carpet. Between these massive stone peaks stretches a lake with emerald green waters that constantly change color depending on the position of the sun. What makes this even more fascinating is that one of Thailand's most beautiful landscapes was born from a dramatic transformation of nature itself. Cheow Lan is not a natural lake. It was created in 1987 when a dam was built to generate electricity and supply power to part of the region. As the reservoir slowly filled, the valley disappeared beneath the rising water. Ancient trails, rolling hills, forests, and even entire communities were submerged, forcing residents to relocate. I've always found it fascinating that some of the world's most famous destinations carry stories filled with contradictions. While the lake became an important source of renewable energy and helped preserve much of the surrounding forest, it also marked the permanent loss of a landscape that had existed for generations. Beneath those calm waters lie old roads, houses, giant trees, fields that once produced food. Everything remains hidden below an apparently peaceful surface. Khao Sok National Park, where the lake is located, protects one of the oldest tropical rainforests on Earth. Many researchers believe it is geologically older than the Amazon rainforest in terms of continuous existence. For tens of millions of years, this ecosystem has endured climate shifts, movements of Earth's crust, and global transformations without ever completely losing its identity. That fact completely changes the way I look at this landscape. Every tree, every vine, every mountain. Everything here represents an extraordinarily ancient fragment of Earth's natural history. And perhaps it is precisely that incredible age that explains the remarkable diversity of life found throughout the region. Before we reveal one of the most unbelievable places on our list, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy this kind of content, we'd love to have you with us. That way, whenever a new video is released, you'll be among the very first to know. Mauritius Underwater Waterfall. It is located at the southwestern tip of the island of Mauritius, in the Indian Ocean. Seen from sea level, the area is already breathtaking. Crystal clear waters reveal sandbars, coral reefs, and countless shades of blue that look as though they were painted by hand. But all it takes is gaining altitude in a helicopter for the entire landscape to transform. Suddenly, something seemingly impossible appears before your eyes. An enormous dark flow that looks as if it is plunging deep into the ocean. The secret lies in the underwater shelf surrounding part of the island. Near the coastline is a vast shallow area covered with brilliant white sand and coral reefs. Just beyond it, the seafloor drops away dramatically into the depths of the Indian Ocean. This sudden change in depth creates an astonishing visual contrast. Ocean currents constantly carry fine sand and sediment along the edge of the underwater shelf. When viewed from above, these sediments appear to pour down the submerged slope. The result looks exactly like a gigantic waterfall disappearing into the depths of the ocean. It is an illusion created entirely by nature, and perhaps that is exactly what makes this place so captivating. It is not trying to fool anyone. Our brains do that on their own. The island of Mauritius itself was formed through intense volcanic activity millions of years ago. Magma rising from the ocean floor gradually built layer upon layer of rock until an island emerged, surrounded by coral reefs that continue to grow slowly even today. That volcanic origin explains much of the landscape we see today. The mountains rising in the background are anything but ordinary. For centuries, sailors navigated these waters without ever realizing the famous underwater waterfall existed. It simply could not be seen from sea level. Only with the advent of aviation did people discover that this corner of the island concealed one of nature's greatest optical illusions. It's fascinating to think about. The phenomenon had always been there. The only thing that changed was the point of view. Fagradalsfjall. If you think you've already seen enough volcanic landscapes, wait until you discover Fagradalsfjall. There is one remarkable detail about this place that completely changes the way we see Iceland. For centuries, it remained almost completely silent. Even its name sparks curiosity. In Icelandic, it means something close to the mountain of the beautiful valley. There's an almost poetic irony in that. A place known for its tranquility suddenly became the center of the world's attention the moment it decided to break centuries of silence. Nature didn't make a dramatic announcement. First came a few small earthquakes, then thousands more. It's interesting how most people associate volcanoes with catastrophic explosions, towering ash clouds, and total devastation. Fagradalsfjall decided to tell an entirely different story. When it finally erupted in March 2021, it did not unleash a massive explosion. Instead, a long fissure opened across the ground, as though someone had drawn a glowing line through an ancient lava field. Fountains of magma rose continuously, illuminating the Icelandic night with colors ranging from brilliant orange to an almost white-hot red. It was an extraordinary spectacle. There was none of the chaos usually associated with the world's most famous volcanoes. Instead, there was an almost hypnotic dance between fire and the dark volcanic landscape. Thousands of people hiked for hours simply to witness the eruption with their own eyes. Now, I want to ask you something. Would you be willing to hike a trail, knowing that, just a few miles ahead, a river of molten lava was slowly flowing across the landscape? Let me know in the comments. I'd really like to find out how many people would accept that experience. The 2021 eruption attracted so much attention that scientists from around the world began monitoring Fagradalsfjall almost every day. Instruments recorded millimeter-scale ground deformation. Satellites tracked changes in surface temperature. Drones flew over newly formed terrain, while geologists collected samples of still hot lava. Rarely has humanity had the opportunity to study an eruption that was both so accessible and relatively safe. But the mountain wasn't finished telling its story. In 2022, another eruption began. Soon afterward, a new fissure opened nearby. The renewed volcanic activity revealed that the system was awakening after a long period of dormancy. Many experts concluded that Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula may be entering a new eruptive cycle that could last for decades, or even centuries. Few countries live with such a constant balance between danger and beauty. Iceland has learned to transform natural hazards into part of its identity. Geothermal energy heats homes. Hot springs support entire communities. Steam rising from the ground is simply part of everyday life. The fire beneath the surface is no longer viewed only as a threat. It has also become a source of life. Miradouro da Lua. Miradouro da Lua doesn't look like a place on Earth. It feels as though someone opened a window to a distant planet and simply forgot to close it. Even more remarkable is the fact that this landscape continues to change every single day, even when no one is there to witness it. Natural columns rise side by side like miniature castles. Narrow canyons carve the ground into hundreds of winding curves. Layers of beige, golden, reddish-brown, and white create patterns that resemble the open pages of a geological history book. Nothing appears random, yet none of it was shaped by human hands. The almost complete absence of vegetation allows every ridge and cliff to receive the full intensity of the sunlight without interruption. Its nickname originated because visitors saw an astonishing resemblance between these ravines and towering formations, and the images returned by the first lunar space missions. There's something wonderfully poetic about that. For decades, imagining the surface of the moon meant picturing a dry, silent world sculpted by erosion. The moment people saw these cliffs in Angola, the comparison came naturally. There is, however, one important difference. The moon remains virtually unchanged for millions of years. Miradouro da Lua is constantly evolving. That may sound surprising when looking at apparently solid rock, but a single heavy rainstorm is enough to send small sections of Earth sliding down the slopes. It's remarkable how nature can create such delicate forms using nothing more than time, water, and gravity. Imagine how many storms were required to carve just one of these towering columns. How many dry seasons alternated with tropical rains. How many grains of sand had to be moved before an ordinary hillside became this enormous maze of ravines. Now, I'd like to hear your opinion. Do you think places like this should have a limited number of visitors to help preserve their natural formations? Or should everyone have unrestricted access? Share your thoughts in the comments. It's a debate taking place in many parts of the world, and it always inspires very different opinions. Chocolate Hills. There is a landscape in the Philippines that defies every comparison. It looks as though someone carefully placed each hill one by one, like a patient giant, arranging them with perfect precision. The most astonishing part is that nature rarely repeats the exact same shape so many times. Yet that is precisely what happened at the Chocolate Hills. More than 1,200 hills are scattered across the island of Bohol, although some estimates suggest there are more than 1,700 formations. Viewed from above, the region resembles an ocean, frozen at the exact moment its waves stopped moving. Every hill has an almost identical shape, rounded, smooth, and remarkably symmetrical. This repetition creates such an unusual visual effect that for a few moments, your brain instinctively searches for an artificial explanation. Even the name sparks curiosity. For much of the year, the hills are covered with lush green vegetation. But when the dry season arrives, the grass changes color completely. The vibrant green fades into a rich golden-brown shade that resembles enormous drops of chocolate scattered across the landscape. That seasonal transformation is exactly what inspired the name Chocolate Hills. The landscape is never exactly the same. Visitors who arrive during the rainy season are greeted by a vibrant scene bursting with life. Just a few months later, it looks like a completely different world. It's almost as though two entirely different landscapes share the same place. For a long time, no one could fully explain how so many nearly identical hills had formed in one location. Before science offered answers, imagination stepped in. One of the best-known legends tells of two giants who battled each other for days. They hurled rocks, mountains, and enormous chunks of earth back and forth until they finally grew tired, ended the fight, and went their separate ways. The marks of that legendary battle remained scattered across the landscape forever. Another story tells of a giant who fell deeply in love with a mortal woman. When she died, his grief was so overwhelming that his enormous tears fell upon the land, forming the hills that dominate the landscape today. Cala Luna. On the eastern coast of Sardinia, where towering limestone cliffs plunge into the Tyrrhenian Sea, lies a beach that seems to exist completely outside the pace of the modern world. No highway leads directly to it. No massive parking lot announces its arrival. For generations, that isolation has been exactly what preserved its character. While so many famous destinations have been shaped by tourism, Cala Luna has continued to be shaped by the wind, the sea, and time itself. If someone showed you nothing more than a photograph of Cala Luna, you might assume it belonged to a remote Pacific island or was generated by artificial intelligence. That reaction is understandable. The water changes color constantly. Within just a few steps, it shifts from pale turquoise to brilliant emerald before fading into a deep sapphire blue that reveals the sudden drop of the seafloor. No camera filter can truly recreate the colors seen in person. The beach stretches for nearly half a mile, but what truly defines its identity are the enormous caves naturally carved into the base of the limestone cliffs. They serve as giant stone terraces overlooking the sea. At certain times of day, their shade extends across much of the beach, creating a natural refuge from the intense Sardinian summer sun. It may seem like a simple detail, but it makes an enormous difference. While visitors at other beaches compete for space beneath umbrellas, here the mountain itself provides shelter. These caves were not formed overnight. Over millions of years, water seeped into tiny cracks within the limestone, gradually dissolving the rock, drop by drop, century after century. Nature worked at a pace impossible for any human being to notice. The result is a collection of formations so perfectly sculpted that they appear to have been carved by giant architects. Balandra Beach. Balandra Beach, in the Mexican state of Baja California Sur, belongs to a very rare category of places. The water is so shallow and so incredibly clear that boats seem to float in mid-air, while white sandbars create winding paths across water that changes color every few yards. Everything feels almost too delicate to be real. It's remarkable that, despite being located just about 15 miles from the city of La Paz, Balandra gives visitors the sensation of being completely disconnected from the rest of the world. The first thing that captures your attention is the bay's extraordinary shallowness. In many areas, you can walk dozens of yards into the sea without the water rising above your waist. It's an unusual experience. The horizon still feels distant, yet the seafloor remains perfectly visible beneath your feet. This phenomenon is no coincidence. The bay's geological shape acts as a natural barrier against the stronger currents of the Gulf of California. Water flows gently into the bay, loses much of its momentum, and remains astonishingly calm throughout much of the year. The result is something that resembles a gigantic natural swimming pool. There are moments when the wind almost disappears completely. During those quiet hours, the sea becomes an enormous mirror. The surrounding desert mountains reflect with such clarity that it becomes difficult to tell where the real landscape ends and its reflection begins. There is another reason Balandra has become one of the most photographed places in Mexico. It isn't just the beach itself, but the entire bay. Hidden coves appear between rocky outcrops. Mangrove forests thrive in sheltered areas. Hills painted in warm ochre tones surround the coastline, creating a natural frame that changes color as the sun moves across the sky. Perhaps you've already seen a photograph of a rock balancing on an impossibly narrow base, appearing to defy every law of physics. That formation is known as El Hongo, or the mushroom. For decades, it became Balandra's most recognizable landmark. Slowly sculpted by wind and saltwater erosion, it looked as though gravity simply didn't apply. Although the original formation suffered damage over the years, its image continues to symbolize the identity of this extraordinary place. Niagara Falls. The Niagara River separates part of the Canadian province of Ontario from the American state of New York, yet its waters flow across that international border without recognizing any human authority. The river begins at Lake Erie, travels toward Lake Ontario, and along the way encounters a dramatic change in elevation. That is where the river stops flowing horizontally and plunges downward. Many people think of Niagara Falls as a single wall of water. I used to believe the same thing until I looked more closely at a map. In reality, Niagara Falls consists of 3 separate waterfalls: Horseshoe Falls, American Falls, and the smaller Bridal Veil Falls. They stand side by side, yet each has its own appearance, volume, and personality. Horseshoe Falls forms the largest and most spectacular section. Its curved crest embraces the rushing water like a monumental arch, creating the impression that the river is disappearing into a massive circular opening. Most of it lies within Canada, although the international border runs directly through its waters. Across the river, American Falls presents a very different appearance. Massive boulders piled at its base interrupt the falling water, breaking it into countless smaller bursts of white spray. Beside it lies Bridal Veil Falls, separated by the tiny Luna Island. Its graceful name almost hides the tremendous force of its impact. The story of these waterfalls began long before either Canada or the United States existed. Around 12,000 years ago, The end of the last ice age completely reshaped this part of North America. Enormous glaciers retreated, vast quantities of water were released, and the Great Lakes gradually assumed a form similar to what we see today. The Niagara River carved its path between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, crossing the Niagara Escarpment. That escarpment is an immense geological formation extending far beyond the falls themselves. Where the river crosses it, layers of rock with different levels of resistance created the perfect conditions for the waterfalls to form. At the surface lies a hard layer composed primarily of dolostone. Beneath it are softer rocks that flowing water erodes much more easily. Even today, both Canada and the United States use the river to generate hydroelectric power. International agreements and carefully managed control systems determine how much water can be diverted, especially overnight and during periods of lower tourist activity. In a sense, the spectacular flow visitors admire during the day is carefully managed. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, it's because you enjoyed our content. Before you go, we've selected another incredible video just for you. Simply click the one on your screen. We'll see you there.